Found it interesting to see a rising star eventually get turned on by the fans. We discussed that and more all in today's episode of the J Area Wrestling Podcast. What is going on, pro wrestling fans and members of the J Area? My name is Jose Ramos Jr. Welcome back to another edition of the J Area Wrestling Podcast. And you saw it in the intro. You heard me talking about it a little bit and, hint at the discussion point of today's episode. But really, the nature of the business has always been an ever evolving thing in pro wrestling. I mean, the name of the game is to get over. You want to be a superstar, you got to get over with the crowd. But in recent times, we've seen that sometimes when a superstar or an aspiring superstar is pushed heavily, this can be a little bit of a turnoff for most wrestling fans. I mean, we've seen many occasions over the last few decades, examples of which we will get into in a bit. But the main reason, of course, is as you've seen the last recent episodes of the podcast itself, we've been talking about Jey Uso, who was a shocking victory at this year's Royal Rumble, wasn't a heavy favorite. A lot of people, myself included, were leaning towards the likes of John Cena, CM Punk, and Roman Reigns. But Jey Uso, coming out of nowhere, I mean, he just lost a World Championship matchup against Gunther at Saturday Night's main event. And here we are plugging him right back into the main event scene, on course to WrestleMania 41 for a rematch against the Ring General. We saw that when he won the World Championship, rather, when he won the Royal Rumble, earning a World Championship match at Mania, the online crowd really was, there was a negative feedback. A lot of people were very anti Jey Uso. They thought this was the worst Royal Rumble winner. They thought this was the worst call, a booking error in the Triple H regime, a regime that isn't really full of many booking errors. It's been consistent. It's been pretty well thought out. And when you take a step back and you look at the logic behind Jey Uso winning the Royal Rumble, he's one of the top baby faces, selling merch, great crowd reaction, very popular with families and the kids, especially because you gotta sell that money, right? It makes sense. But a lot of people in the IWC, the internet wrestling community, very anti Jey. And it's very interesting to see because in the last couple of years, following Jey Uso and the Bloodline story, the storyline that seemingly never ends, a lot of people were falling in line with Jey Uso. We became fans of his through the turmoil, through the dissension between he and the tribal chief Roman Reigns. A lot of people started feeling sympathy for him. We started developing a lot of fanfare for Jey Uso. The story that was being told was that, hey, these were the Usos, one of the greatest tag teams of all time, but a period in time where we couldn't recognize who was who, and that became the running theme, is that Jey, although he's one of the most accomplished wrestlers on the roster, he couldn't separate himself from his brother. And now, being able to separate himself as main event Jey Uso, leaving the bloodline behind, having championship aspirations, whether it's the IC title or now the world title, we started seeing differences. We started seeing him being a standout star. The crowd was getting along with him. Great entrance, great moveset, great charisma. What wasn't there to like about Jey Uso? So slowly but surely, became a big fan favorite. You go all the way to WrestleMania 40, did have a little bit of a stinker with Jimmy. It wasn't one of the best matches on the card. But then that doesn't slow him down because Backlash, the following month, he faces off against Damian Priest for the World Championship. And he got this great ovation, this great welcoming by the crowd in France. And it really never slowed down from there. People wanted him to win the King of the Ring. People wanted him to win Money in the Bank. But little by little, we started seeing a little bit of the crowd turning on Jey Uso. People criticized his moveset. People criticized his promo. They thought the word yeet was the only reason why he had gotten over and not because of actual talent. Little by little, we started seeing that same old tired story of the fans turning on the babyface that they helped elevate. And that's something I wanted to talk about in today's episode because there's been several instances, especially now, of these baby faces that the crowd has crowned as the people's champion, as their perennial favorite, only for them to be turned on. Jey Uso obviously is the most common, point here when it comes to the modern day pro wrestling. But you look at a guy like Damian Priest. Damian Priest is another one who was heralded as one of the top stars in NXT. Came out of NXT, was fighting for the United States Championship until he ended up winning it. Then got stuck with the Judgment Day, slowly but surely gained momentum. People were fans of Damian. I'm a fan of Damian. Gets the Money in the Bank contract. Doesn't necessarily have a memorable run with the contract, but does have a fantastic cash in at WrestleMania 40. We see El Campeón, the evolving character of Damian Priest from mid card to main eventer. He's a star now, for better or for worse. But then that feud with Finn Balor may have dragged. Won't argue that. Some people believe that. I believe it. There was a point there where there was a little bit of a lull, and we kind of let that feud drag on maybe a tad too longer. A tad too longer than what we could have. And it kind of sat unfavorably with fans. And now Damian Priest is now suffering from that very same reaction of Jey Uso. Look at Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry in TNA. And the thing to remember here, all these guys are getting good reactions in crowd. In the audience, people are clapping along with Joe Hendry. They're cheering Damian. They're yeeting with Jey Uso. But it's always on the internet that people are voicing that displeasure, saying that they're overhyped, overrated, that maybe these guys aren't who we really thought they were. But that doesn't have any type of reflection on TV. Again, in audience, the live audience. And I think that's very fascinating. And it goes back always to the old saying of people can say whatever they want behind a keyboard and a monitor. And I will say the irony of it all is here I am behind a monitor speaking to you about pro wrestling. But the difference is I'm not one to follow in line with that common assumption that like, hey, they're overrated. No, I'm willing to give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm willing to stick with them as they've stuck with me. And I'm a fan of all three individuals, Joe Hendry, Damian Priest, and Jey Uso as well. But it fascinates me. It fascinates me the dichotomy of it all. To see the differing perspectives of the in-house audience and the online viewership. It's fascinating. It really is. Why is that? Well, I think it's very much how we said. People can say whatever they want behind a screen and a keyboard. They can voice that displeasure. They think that because of a place like Twitter or YouTube, for that matter, it lends people a voice. It lends people that opportunity to maybe be a little bit of a contrarian. And in a day and age where trolling is very much a popular pastime amongst, the people, I think that's also the case of it. But it wasn't always like that. It wasn't always like that with the internet. Because you look at the recent instances of those stars, and we can go back a little bit further and see people like Becky Lynch. And again, little by little, start going backwards. Becky Lynch, who was one of the top stars in NXT, 1/4 of the 4 horsewomen alongside Sasha Banks, Charlotte, and Bayley, and was deemed to be the biggest star in the company for quite some time, was the man. Becky 2 belts, WrestleMania 35, remember that? The main event of WrestleMania 35, Becky Lynch won that. People were going crazy for Becky. They were treating her with like Austin like pops. I wouldn't go as far to say Austin level, but some people were going that far to describe them. And then over the time, we started seeing people call her Becky Hogan, thinking that she used her name and her reputation to get her over other wrestlers. For example, Liv Morgan. There was that battle royal from last year. And people voiced their displeasure. But if you look at the overall work of Becky Lynch, specifically within the last couple of years, she of course had that world title run that ultimately defeated Liv Morgan, but it helped get Liv over. Liv ends up beating Becky and had a lengthy title reign. People were criticizing her for going to NXT. Why did she go to NXT? Why did she go ahead and beat Tiffany Stratton? Well, she got to have decent matches with people at NXT that weren't really getting looked at. You include someone like Becky Lynch, the star power, the name value of a Becky Lynch, and you're going to attract more viewers. And on top of that, she put over Lyra Valkyria, who won the NXT title from Becky Lynch. It's an ever-evolving circle when it comes to the business. If you're going to take the title from someone, you're going to hope that you can take that momentum and put over the next incoming champion. Becky Lynch is no stranger to that. But I think the most common example of the audience turning on someone is John Cena. John Cena, who is widely regarded as one of the greatest of all time. He's on his farewell tour. And we remember the early rise of John Cena coming in 2002, having the generic biker shorts where it would match the city in which he was fighting in. He wouldn't have any sort of character development until he introduced the Vanilla Ice cosplay, the Halloween episode of '02, and then started rapping. That Doctor of Thugonomics gimmick did wonders for John Cena. It separated him from the roster. It became a very much iconic character trait of his, so that when we saw the rise of John Cena up until '05, when he wins the WWE title, he defeats JBL at WrestleMania 21, has a solid I Quit match against JBL at Judgment Day. And then we get to the summer, where he's fighting against Chris Jericho at SummerSlam. And this was one of the first instances that we saw the crowd kind of turning on John, right? John Cena did nothing wrong. He's doing his job. He's being a babyface, an entertaining babyface, having solid outings in the ring. We're not going to pretend like he's Kurt Angle and having 5-star classics, but by no means was he a bad worker. And he was only getting better. I mean, you get to 2007, and I think that's when he really found his stride, having solid matches against Shawn Michaels, Randy Orton, Edge. That's when he started finding his stride. But the fans began turning on him. Why? Because he became the face of the company. Because he was getting over pushed. Because he was being presented as the ever so powerful Super Cena. And people weren't a fan of that. It goes back to one of my favorite quotes from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, 2002, the very first Spider-Man film starring Tobey Maguire, when Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin ends up saying that in spite of everything that you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. And it's just, again, and it even goes to another quote here, a very famous quote from The Dark Knight, a little bit of a superhero theme there. The Dark Knight being, you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Over time, people began to fall out of favor with them. John Cena suffered from that. From 2002 to 2005, he was on top of the world, getting the biggest reactions. But then following that, from '06 to maybe all the way to 2017, it was always 50-50. Let's go Cena, Cena sucks. They would boo Cena. You would hear portions of the crowd that were women and children cheering for John. And then it was like the 18 to 39 men demographic that was booing him. And now we reached a point here at the end of his career where people have completely flipped now. And everyone loves John Cena because you recognize that greatness. But it's very interesting to see how quick people are able to turn on these baby faces. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer for people to accept the next big thing. And I think the best option here, the best example, would be that of Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns, a third of the Shield alongside Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins. We started seeing towards the end of 2013 that Roman was getting, groomed to be a big star. We saw him in the Royal Rumble, had a great showing, broke Kane's record for most eliminations. Nearly won the thing, but obviously Batista won. And so we started seeing the early signs of Roman becoming possibly the next star, the next face of the company. And it would be an uphill battle from 2014 all the way to 2020. People consistently booed him. They rejected him. They wanted guys like Daniel Bryan at the top. And I'll confess, I was one of those people. I wanted Daniel Bryan to be the top star. I didn't like that Roman Reigns was essentially being shoved down everyone's throat. Yeah, he's a cool guy. He can go in the ring, but he wasn't our guy. And so the consistency of pushing him, even though the fan reaction wasn't well received, it was a day and age where one man who was running the company didn't listen to the crowd. He said, you're going to like him whether you like it or not. And then there was the disingenuous little details that they would add, whether it was his promo work, which was not good at that time. Look no further than the suffering succotash promo that Roman Reigns had to cut on Seth Rollins. And then there was the time where he had the eye contacts, where they gave him these baby blue contacts to change his eye color. And it's like, why? It was just so disingenuous. I don't know why they were doing it. They were trying to present something that he wasn't. And it wasn't until we saw him turn heel and become the tribal chief in the summer of 2020. That's when it all changed. People flipped. People said, whoa, he's a bad guy now. Oh, he has a little bit of an edge to him. Okay. And people began to develop that intrigue to the point where they had no option but to turn him babyface again this past summer in 2024. But it's ebbs and flows. It's highs and lows when it comes to pro wrestling. One day you're on top of the world and everybody loves you, and the next day they resent you and they boo you for the very same things that got you over. But that's the thing about pro wrestling. It's all about adapting. Whether it's on the fly, whether it's in story, you have to make sure you're over with the crowd. And once you're over with the crowd, the next mission is, how do I stay over? You cannot remain complacent. You can never remain complacent. Complacency is the enemy of success, because once you start realizing that you hit a plateau and you're no longer growing, that's when the fall off begins to happen. And that's when the decline is inevitable. But the WWE is in a good spot here. They have an abundance of characters, a plethora of talent at their disposal. It's just a matter of finding ways to promote them and to highlight their strengths rather than their weaknesses. And I think they've done a good job with that. I still am struggling to figure out the hate for Jey Uso, to bring this all the way back around to our initial, individual that we're talking about. Because he organically got over with the crowd. He organically got over with the crowd in a way that was endearing and in a way that was natural. It wasn't disingenuous. It was very genuine. And now the audience, a portion of them, has turned on him. It's interesting to see how we're going to navigate this. Because it's like I said, you look at the shows. If you tune into Monday Night Raw tonight, you're probably not going to see people boo him. But then you go to the internet and that's when it happens. It's that disconnect. It's a reminder to let you all know, and a reminder to myself, that the internet isn't a real place. It's a place where we all kind of have exaggerated opinions and hyperbolic takes when it comes to pro wrestling or just anything in that nature. But the way you behave online is probably going to be different than the way you behave in person. The very same people that are booing Jey Uso are probably in line to get a picture, to get an autograph. That's just how it's always been. That's how it's always been. That's how it's always going to be. Is it a shame? Yeah, I don't know. That's up for you to decide. Is it ironic? You better believe it. You better believe it. But Jey Uso is the 2025 women's, well, not even the 2025 men's Royal Rumble. But since we're on the topic of the women's Royal Rumble winner, Charlotte Flair, another example. But Charlotte Flair is an interesting case here, because she didn't do anything wrong. I don't think she's done everything wrong. She's done her job. She's done what's asked of her. But it's the consistent pushing of Charlotte Flair. The times that she's been gone from the company and then makes a miraculous return and then immediately is placed into the championship window, that's what I think turns people off. She's about to be a 15-time world champion. There's been times where she would leave, come back, in her very first matchup, she would win the title back. It's like, for real? Like, there's people here who have been working day in and day out for a year plus, and yet we're just going to hand it off to her? I get it. Name value is there. I get it. You want to have some type of a lineage when it comes to your championship, but you also want that championship to mean something. And if it just keeps hot potatoing back and forth, it kind of devalues it. Does it not? Maybe that's just me. Love to hear from you guys in the comments. But Charlotte Flair is the one instance where I'm like, okay, I get it. That one, I get it. Am I going to trash her and say, oh, she's terrible? No. But I do think the booking of her can be questionable at times. At the end of the day, I really think the overall theme of this episode is that it's very difficult to satisfy pro wrestling fans. Daniel Bryan, back in like 2018, 2019, described them as fickle. One day they're blowing in one direction in the wind, and then the next, it's the other way. It's very difficult to please when you're looking at a wide audience, especially ones in pro wrestling, because there's something in there for everybody. Maybe this version is not for you. Maybe this genre isn't for them. It's hard to please everybody. You're not going to. If you go into it trying to please everybody, you're going to fail. That's why I think it's important to recognize the trends. Follow the live audience. Follow the merch sales, because hey, business is business. And I think they're doing just fine. If people really had a problem with some of these top stars, they'd be booing them right now. But they're not. That's just my 2 cents. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know down below, what are your thoughts and opinions on the trend of babyfaces getting booed? Who are some other instances that were a quick rise, and ultimately with the fans turning on them. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It's something a little bit different. I want to do a free form episode where it's just me, talking just straight with you guys. Like a conversation, like two friends having a quick conversation about pro wrestling. If you guys enjoyed this format of the episode, go ahead and drop a thumbs up on the video, comment down below some of your thoughts, some of your questions. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more episodes of the J Area Wrestling Podcast, as well as joining in on the live streams. We had a great live stream on Sunday night, an Ask Me Anything live stream. Great conversations were had, great friends have been made, and I can't thank you guys enough for the love and support that you've consistently been showing our way here on YouTube. So I appreciate you guys. Hopefully you guys have a great weekend. Hopefully you guys have a great week as well. I'll be seeing you later in tonight's live stream. Of course, my name is Jose Ramos Jr. Thank you for joining me on today's episode. Everyone be safe, be careful, and we'll see you then.